Microsoft Azure is increasingly becoming famous as a lot of companies are adopting Microsoft as their cloud technology or as a cloud platform. And currently, Microsoft owns the second largest share of the cloud market. So a lot of companies want to get their services on Microsoft Azure, and a lot of companies actually require experts who mastered Microsoft. But the focus of today's video is on Microsoft Azure and how you can get yourself a job in the Microsoft Azure space. Azure interview tips. I'll be sharing some key tips which you can use as an Azure expert to land yourself your dream job this year. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel DevOps with Mike. If you are not yet subscribed, do well to hit the subscribe button right away. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for watching our content. Why not join our DevOps community with the link in the channel description? I will be sharing a lot of resources that can help you in your DevOps on your cloud journey, be it on Microsoft Azure or on Amazon Web Services. The very first thing which I want to share with you is you should have an understanding of the Azure ecosystem. We'll have an understanding of how the job market is with Microsoft Azure. Now, there are a lot of people who have gained the skills as Azure experts, and there are a couple of roles which companies require experts to demonstrate professional experience in these roles. And by you understanding the Azure landscape, you better know how to position yourself rightly to meet industry requirements. By this, there are several roles which you can occupy as an Azure expert or as someone who has Azure skill sets, and with you having an understanding on some of the requirements for these roles, you can rightly position yourself to gain the job. Now, as far as Microsoft Azure is concerned, just like Amazon Web Service, there are several roles which you can occupy, ranging from roles as an Azure cloud engineer, where you're providing solutions to meet the requirements of companies as an engineer. We also have an Azure DevOps engineer who is responsible for ensuring that DevOps best practices are implemented in a given cloud environment or in a given company environment. So if you have an experience with Microsoft Azure DevOps services like Azure Pipelines, Azure Repos, Azure Boards, and all the like, you want to see how you can apply for some roles as an Azure. We have Azure Site Reliability Engineer. We equally have those who architect solutions to meet company requirements. We call them solutions architects. So you can have an Azure solutions architect whose main responsibility is architecting solutions to meet the requirement of a given company. And well, after architecting the solution, we can now work with the cloud engineer and Azure cloud engineer to make sure that these requirements are made and properly implemented in a given environment. And as you should know, security is something which companies hold in high as far as the environments are concerned. So some roles you see Azure security engineer or Azure cloud security engineer, or we can have an Azure DevSecOps engineer to meet the requirements or the security requirements of their given environment. And equally, we can have an Azure administrator role or an Azure AI engineer and a whole lot of other roles. So when getting ready for your interviews, you want to make sure you have a deep understanding on the Azure job landscape. What are some of the roles that are available for you, and what are the roles which you can apply for? Some of the roles you can have senior roles, some of them you can have mid-level roles, and some others you can have junior roles. Have an understanding of the job market as far as Microsoft Azure is concerned, and you then get yourself ready to meet the requirements of some of these jobs. For you to tailor your resume for Azure. That is to say that if you're applying for a DevOps engineer, or you're applying as an Azure cloud engineer or Azure infrastructure engineer or Azure site reliability engineer, whatever the case might be, you want to tailor your resume to show Azure as your key cloud stack. Now, tailoring your resume means you should be able to list some of the key services which you've implemented on Microsoft Azure Cloud, and probably some other open source technologies which you've combined to have a smooth functional production or staging or testing environment on Microsoft Azure. So listing all these key services in your resume can rightly position you for a job as an Azure expert. And by that, you want to highlight your experience with Azure foundational services for storage, services for networking, services for compute, services for databases. You want to highlight your experience with services for CI/CD, services for DevOps, and a whole lot of other services. And equally, if you have experience working with third-party tools on Microsoft Azure, you want to add some of these third-party tools in your resume to further give an understanding of not just cloud technologies from the Azure perspective, but an agnostic view to cloud technologies in Microsoft Azure. Probably you want to list your experience with tools like Terraform for infrastructure as code. You want to list your experience with tools like Jenkins for continuous integration and continuous deployment, and probably you might have set up a containerized environment where you use Docker as a container engine. So you specify some of these third-party tools in your resume. So you must have a compelling resume that projects your experience with Microsoft Azure as well as other third-party tools. if you want to stand out well as a Microsoft expert. Most of our previous videos in this channel, I've talked a lot about you preparing for interview questions. There are a lot of common questions which you cannot escape when getting yourself ready for interviews, and you going through some of these questions or you being ready for some of these questions is one of the key things which I recommend you as you're getting ready for your jobs. So the third thing which I recommend is for you to prepare for common interview questions. Now, in my DevOps community with the link in the chat, I share a lot of resources for interview preparation, and equally you can book a one-on-one mentorship call with me where I'll give you further guidelines on how to prepare for your interview. But summarily, you preparing for an interview, you must be ready to receive a call from recruiters, and when recruiters reach out to you, there are common questions which the recruiters want to find out from you. Probably what's your visa status, what's your salary expectation, maybe your experience on a given role. Some recruiters will ask you a summary experience of some of the things which you've been doing. Others want to know your experience with certain technologies with respect to the job which they are offering. So you being able to answer some of these interview questions over and over again will give you the necessary confidence you need to break that interview. And again, I've emphasize the need for demo interviews. Demo interviews is very important. If you have a friend, 2 or 3, which you're currently preparing for interviews with, you want to take demo or practice interviews with these persons where you familiarize yourself with some of these common interview questions. The moment you can answer some of these common interview questions among your peers, it's going to be much easy for you to answer some of these questions during your technical interviews. Practice a lot of common interview questions, and equally practice a lot of demo interviews with your friends or personally, such that you won't be overwhelmed with some common questions when asked during your interview. The next thing which I want to highlight is the importance of certifications. I've done a lot of videos about certifications on Amazon Web Service, but the focus of this video is on Microsoft Azure, and it's very important for you to value certifications. Microsoft offers a range of certifications for beginners, for those who've been in the industry for a given length of time, maybe 2-3 years, and for seniors or those who've been in the industry for a way longer time. So you want to leverage the importance of some of these certifications as you're preparing for your interviews. Probably you've already acquired a given skill set on Microsoft Azure. For you to further prove your understanding or your aptitude with some of these technologies is by you taking a certification. We have a lot of certifications on Microsoft Azure. AZ 900, the basic fundamental certification. We have the developer associate. We have the associate certifications for solutions architect, associate certifications for cloud engineer, and all the likes. So you want to check out Microsoft certifications to know more about the certifications program. While getting ready for your interviews, you want to get some of these certifications that will help you to get ready faster for your interviews. Of course, I'll leave the link to Microsoft Azure certification page where you can go there and find a lot of these certifications and get yourself ready to get some of these certifications along your technical or professional experience which you have on Microsoft Azure. In addition to you getting some of these certifications, there's a serious need for you to master the skill set. You must be able to show your professional experience during your interviews, and by you demonstrating your professional experience, you want to share your experience with a wide variety of services on Microsoft Azure. You want to first start with services that have to do with the global infrastructure on Azure, talking your experience maybe with Azure regions, Azure availability zones, and all the likes as far as the global infrastructure on Azure is concerned. Also, you want to share your experience with identity and access management on Microsoft Azure. And one of the key services which Azure offers is the Active Directory service. So the Active Directory service is one of the key things which recruiters are looking out for, experts which can manage Active Directory in their environment. Once you have an experience with these technologies, you want to mention your professional experience with these technologies during your interviews. So during your interviews, you want to share your experience with maybe virtual machines for compute. You want to share your experience with Amazon. You want to share your experience with Azure SQL for databases or Cosmos DB. You want to share your experience with various storage, blob storage, file share, and you also want to share your experience with DevOps tools on Azure, Azure repos, Azure artifacts, Azure bots, Azure pipelines. You also want to share your experience with Azure Resource Manager for creation of resources as code on Azure portals. So demonstrating your professional experience with these technologies will give you a competitive advantage over a lot of people taking interviews for some of these roles. So you must be able to detailedly describe the services which you've used on Microsoft Azure in your conversations with your recruiters. That is if you want to stand out during your technical interview or whatever interview you're having, be it a phone call interview or with a technical interview or with an interview with the hiring manager with respect to any role on Microsoft Azure. And lastly, you must be able to demonstrate your experience with soft skills or behavioral skills, or you must have some aspect of behavioral skills which are not necessarily related to Microsoft Azure, which you must demonstrate with your recruiters. And basically, I'm talking about behavioral skills, your problem-solving ability, your ability to work in a team, your analytical abilities, your abilities to work under pressure or to work within a given limited time frames. You demonstrating some of these non-cultural skills can equally give you a competitive advantage during your interviews. So you must list some of these non-technical skills, your experience working in teams, bigger teams or smaller teams, your experience leading teams, your experience in problem solving, your analytical experience, and a lot of other experience which you might have which doesn't necessarily relate to Microsoft Azure. So demonstrating this experience will then add to your technical or to your professional experience which you have as far as the technologies are concerned, and that can give you a competitive advantage during your technical or during your interviews. Have a list of some of these known technical skills which you also want to highlight during your interviews, because some of these skills can actually give you a competitive edge, or they can make you more competitive during an interview over a wide variety of people. So thank you for watching this video to the end. We're focusing on some of the things which you must do if you want to stand out during your Azure interview.